War, 1765. Those were years that really pissed a lot of people off because the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, and the Quarterly Act were enacted. And they just, the columnists, they protested that paying heavy taxes violated their God-given right. And God forbid, would you want somebody to move into your house because they were you were told you had to let them move in? It's kind of what's going on now, isn't it? States are asking if you'll take immigrants in to your home. And it's against the law, and it's against the Constitution. So you have no legal right to allow any immigrant to come into your home and live with you, and you have no God-given obligation to do so either. So, as you know, Boston's own Sam Adams, yes, I'm talking about the guy who made the beer, handed out Massachusetts circular letters denouncing the Parliament's acts, which I had read before. The Sugar Act, where they lowered duties on molasses and columnist imported from the French West Indies, yet it increased on other imported goods. Isn't that kind of what's going on with all the tariffs? Tariff is just pretty much a fancy word for tax. But we deal with that. But they still want American goods, but they want to pay international prices. So that's how they get away with having American jobs being placed overseas. Lower wages, and it's not even the same quality product. Anyway, back to 1768, the Liberty, owned by John Hancock, ported into Boston. And people were so angry that they attacked the customs officers and seized the ship due to the repelling of the Townshend duties, which was named after Charles Townshend. In turn, they stated that they were going to tax tea. And as we know, the Boston Tea Party was done by a bunch of angry guys who dressed up as Indians and attacked and threw tea overboard into the Boston Harbor. And, they were directed. They did this because they wanted to go against the royal rule. So, what happened? It was the beginning of independence. John Locke urged that all persons possess the natural right to life and liberty and prosperity. So, because of what they did, because they wanted to have their freedom, because the people that came here looking for religious freedom and wanted to get away from the ruling of the King of England, Parliament got pissed. The English Parliament got pissed, so they declared that Massachusetts was in rebellion. But see, Massachusetts was not in rebellion. They were just trying to, I would say they're probably in rebellion. But the King of England made a big deal about it. Well, so they wanted to let them know that yes, we are rebelling, we're pretty mad about what you're doing. So they wrote a olive branch petition and they sent it to the King of England because the king was mad about it. He was like, no way. If I can't have this new land, neither can they. So that's when he decided it was time to send over British troops. And to prove his point, he sent 700 redcoats to Boston, where the seize of weapons were a cache, like when you play Minecraft or some kind of RGB game where you have stuff hidden, a cache of weapons were hidden in Concord. And Paul Revere, and William Dow's. They went up to the top of the church tower, and you know that saying, one if by land, if two if by sea. Well, they ended up on June 17th, the Redcoats, 1,000 against 300 colonists at Bunker Hill and Breeds Hill was the first actual battle of the Revolutionary War. Thomas Paine's common sense would be the way he would denounce King George III as a brute royal. Being called a brute royal by colonists in America really got him going, man. He was mad. The British had a disciplined army and navy, but the Continental Army was made up of farmers, Minutemen, and they were inexperienced at fighting tactics. Seeing this, the men were down and out in Valley Forge, where Paine once seen that these were times that try men's souls. In the Crisis, the newest pamphlet in which he had written. But in 1783, Britain finally recognized America's independence. So needless to say, there was all these people that wanted to get away from England to freely practice their own religion in the New World, have their God-given rights. So in 1620, when the Mayflower arrived at Plymouth Rock, they had sanctuary in the Dutch city of Linden, but the Pilgrims wanted to go to America because they were economic migrants. They were not making enough in this Dutch town of Linden to support themselves because they were still being taxed, taxed really bad. So they had the either choice of to stay, or they would go to England, or not England, they would go to America. So they decided to go to America, so they got on the Mayflower and went over there. And the most profitable town that they had was Jamestown. It was run by a company called the Virginia Company, by 70 men in London who were called the Merchant Adventurers. They supplied the capital by buying what would be the first ever joint stock company in America. Still, they wanted to get a return on their investments, requiring Pilgrims to work in the companies for the first 7 years. Isn't that kind of like what happens here? Is you come here to America, you open a business, and if you're a foreigner, you don't pay taxes for 7 years? Isn't that kind of falls into that same category, which is weird because it happened back in 1620, and it's happening now. So how is that a change? That whole thing was considered the Mayflower Compact, where 41 men on this ship decided to sign a compact that they didn't want to work for this company for 7 years. They wanted to branch out on their own and be their own farmers and be their own people and do what they wanted to do with their life. But because Jamestown was such profitable from the Virginia Company and these 70 men, that they really had no choice. So they signed what they called the Mayflower Compact to form a civil body to enact that just and legal laws, and that was in 1691. When Plymouth Rock became part of Massachusetts. They were so pissed that they shipped the people that owned the Virginia Company. They wanted money back or product back, but because they didn't get money back or product back as much as they thought they were going to get, they were so mad because they were sending over empty ships. And first and foremost, it was supposed to be fur, timber, and fish. That was the agreement, but they weren't sending that kind of stuff over. They were sending over things that made no sense, like beads, jewels, moccasin shoes from Indian trades. So, you know, let's go back to the war in 1777. Still raging Americans were confronted with self-government. Congress adopted the Articles of Confederation on March 1st, 1781, setting foot the first independent republic to branch away from England, next to Greece, which was the first country to ever do that. You know, the first Constitution, the United States Constitution, the one that we live by today, was frameworked by the Articles of Confederation. And for that, you know, we were able to make war, peace, conduct foreign relations, control currency, borrow money, set boundaries for each state or colony, and oversee the Native American relationships. See, at that point, they didn't want to move the Native Americans like Jefferson wanted to do later on in years to come, to move them all west of the Mississippi, so this way the rich people and slavery and all that stuff can go on, and those Indians, those American Indians that ended up getting caught in crosshairs, they also ended up becoming slaves because they didn't want to leave the east side of the Mississippi. But we'll get there when we get there. We're not even like near that in any of these episodes. You know, each state would have its sovereignty, its freedom, its independence from with its each power and the jurisdiction to its rights. You know, but the problem was that the power to tax and regulated Americans and enforced own measures for each state was a very big problem, because each state had different rules, regulations. They had different money. You could not say you can today the same note of money from Florida to New York, from New York to California. Nope, it was like an exchange where you had to exchange money from Florida to get money from California in order to buy a California product. You know, and that, or California wasn't even in there. Let me use a better, New York wanted to buy something from, say, South Carolina. You had to take your money and transfer it into South Carolina money in order to buy it. And that was more of a problem because their values were different. So it became a really big problem when it came to, you know, the currency and exchange and trade. So there was other problems that were also in this Articles of Confederation. There was no chief executive. As we know, chief executive is the president. There was no national jurisdiction, which today is considered the federal government. So by 1787, they seen that a greater federal strength was needed to unite the colonies. All this was debated between July 1776 and November 1777 in Independence Hall in Philadelphia. So, as we know, common sense will tell you that that's where the Declaration of Independence was signed by the same people that signed the Constitution. You know, it was the Second Continental Congress Convention. It was very hot. It was very stifling. They wanted to keep it secret. They didn't want anybody to know what was going on, even though some people did peek through the windows and hear and eavesdrop. But it was just rumblings through the colonies of what was going on until they actually, you know, drafted it. Ben Franklin drafted it, and he was able to get it, you know, get it going. But when they did that, they drafted it and they brought it upon Shea, Daniel Shea. They had an armed uprising in Western Mass, near Worcester, in response to the debt crisis. Like I said, because of the money, the transfer of money and everything, along the citizens of both individuals and businesses. They have tried to overthrow the government after the unsuccessful attempt to seize weapons from the Springfield Army Depot. The shifting of balance and blame was aggravated, and the mass elites got like really mad. Like all the people that like made a ton of money in Massachusetts because of trade and everything and owning businesses, they were mad about what was going on. So those that had political interest in the bad economic conditions, this fight was broken up by local militia leaders and formed, the forming of the Continental Army by Officer Benjamin Lincoln. Yeah, isn't that great? Benjamin Lincoln. So those people were pissed about how they finally got their independence, but when they go to be heard, they find out that they're being rammed against with taxes. This is where the coin term people always use when they see Massachusetts, they call it Taxachusetts, because everything is taxed. It has been taxed for like hundreds of years, and it never changes, because that's the way it works. And and the man, obviously, the man that actually drafted the Articles of Confederation, as I said before, was Benjamin Franklin, of course. In later years, a delegate from Connecticut, Silas Deane, offered his own constitution. And ultimately they shut it down because he really wasn't much of anything, because he was just a statesman. He wasn't like up in higher rank like Benjamin Franklin, Adams, Washington, you know. So John Dickerson of Pennsylvania, after much without the reviews, provided the basis of the Articles of Confederation. He put more depth into the fact that money needed to be the same, taxes needed to be the same, you could trade with whomever you wanted to trade with, it didn't matter, Native American, African American, it didn't matter. He felt that everybody was same under God, and that's where the part of that word comes from, under God, is because he felt that, you know, in America everybody was equal. And a lot of people also felt that African Americans were below, but above Native Americans, because Native Americans actually had something of value, as the trade of slavery did not, other than making free money for the southern farms and things like that. But we're not getting to that right now. I will get there. That will probably be next episode. You know, it was finally ratified. The Articles of Confederation was done ratified. But Maryland didn't agree to the ratification because they were being dicks about it. They felt that they were going to lose their land, and John Dickerson guaranteed them that they would not lose their land because it was going to be split in two. Maryland actually became two states. It was Maryland, and then it became Virginia. So that's how you became Maryland and Virginia, because Maryland was one whole colony at one point, and then it was separated into two, so it's Maryland and now Virginia. You know, they wanted to dominate, they felt that Virginians were going to dominate the neighborhood and take over, you know, like be a big old gang of people and just be like, you know, we're going to take over Maryland, you know, blah, 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 we're going to do this, do that, you know, peace signs and shit like that. But it didn't work out that way. You know, Maryland decided to finally take their thumb out of their mouth and get with the program on March 1st, 1781. You know, And Dickerson always said, you know, if there is a will, there is always a way. And that's exactly how Maryland decided that it was time to ratify their portion of and agree to the Articles of Confederation, because they were given the assurance that they would not lose their land, Virginia would have their land, and there would be no fighting in between colonies. You know, they wanted the West, and they were like, no, it's 2 states, and this is what's going to happen, and this is how it went from 12 to 13 colonies, because it was actually 12 in the beginning, and then after the ratification, it became 13. Well, not many people knew that. They probably didn't know that at all. So, it's just, you know, our founding fathers were mindful that the royal tyranny had really placed a spark in a revolution, getting people pissed about taxes and everything, and the point is that to become survivors of the most treacherous actions. You know, rising like a phoenix after the king finally agreed, sure, let them be free. It's kind of like when Antoinette said, fine, let them eat cake. It's the same text. You know, let them be free. As she let poor people starve, she said, let them eat cake. You know, every other point that they were coming as, you know, survivors, you know, sure, let them be free. Yet it was not easy when they began coming back, going to the West Indies and getting trading goods. The King of England was like, no, hell no. You're not coming back here, you're not getting anything. So that was the point of his stubbornness, is what at this point stopped the new Americans, or the colonists, to getting on ships and going to the French West Indies or going across the sea to do trading, because they'd already screwed the 70 London guys at a Virginia company, and the king found out about it. So, to round it all up, is that he said, no, you know, you're not coming here to, you're not even coming over on this side of the ocean to get anything, because you wanted your independence. Well, guess what? I own everything on this side of the earth. And you're not coming across the pond to come over here to get or do anything, because you didn't want to be part of our country. Guess what? You're not getting nothing from our country, even if it's trade or you pay for it. And if you do end up getting something, and if you do end up getting something from from a country that I own, high tariffs will be applied. And, well, he didn't say tariffs. High taxes will be applied, but tariffs are what they're called now. So the next time we meet, we will discuss the beginning of the U.S. Constitution and the growth of the colonies and what they had to do to become industrious and survive the New World. You know, history is exactly what it is. His story. And his story tells you that we have so many things that need to be diversified. We have so many things that need to be changed. We have so many amendments that need to be ratified within our now United States Constitution. Can't ratify the Declaration of Independence because that's a solid piece of history work. You know, piece of art, as most people say today. Because our societies are changing and we have no capabilities as people. We have no capabilities of doing anything because the politicians seem to be doing everything for us, whether we like it or not, and in most cases we don't like what's going on. But I'm going to read you something. I talked about this earlier, about Shays' Rebellion. Nearly all the soldiers who fought for America's independence were farmers. But once the war was won, many turned against the new government they had helped to bring into being. Now England's farmers suffered greatly in the post-war depression. Taxes on land and buildings were high, and income from the crops pitifully low. Many farms were confiscated and their dispossessed owners thrown into jail for inability to meet outstanding debts. That's why in 1785 in Worcester County, Massachusetts, 92 men were in prison. But Daniel Shays was a farmer and a captain of the Continental Army. He organized a drilled ragtime army, Massachusetts farmers, demanding tax relief, mortarianism, and debt collection to be abolished, and other fiscal reforms. During the late summer of 1786, armed bands of Shayists broke up court sessions and prevented sheriff sales. So, that is why Daniel Shays did that, was because he was standing up for himself along with 92 men who had lost their farms because of high taxes. And they wanted to, at that point, fight to get their farms back, to stop the sale, to stop auctions where more Massachusetts elites can buy their land. And God knows what to do with it, as these people end up becoming deprived of their own being, of why they came here.